Let me tell you something uncomfortable, but powerful. Sometimes the most commanding move you can make is none at all. You don't always need to fight for someone's attention. You don't have to keep proving your worth. There comes a moment when stepping back speaks louder than staying present. People get used to access. They get used to your yes, your availability, your warmth, and slowly, without even realizing it, they stop appreciating it. Now here's the trick. You don't need to yell. You don't need to beg for them to notice. You simply step back. You stay silent. And what happens? The silence starts to echo. It forces them to ask questions they've been avoiding. Where did that person go? Why does it feel empty without them? What did I do to lose that connection? See, when you remove your energy from a space, it creates a vacuum. And only those who truly valued it will feel it. This isn't about playing games. This is about restoring balance. Because here's what I want you to remember. Your attention is not a given, it's a gift. And when someone realizes that the gift has been pulled away, that's when they finally understand its value. Not because you forced them to, but because your absence did the work your words couldn't. And sometimes they'll come back. Not because you chased, but because they finally caught up. So step back. Stay silent. Not to hurt them, but to heal you. Because anyone worth keeping will notice the silence, will feel the loss. And if they're the right ones, they won't just come back, they'll beg. Power isn't proven by presence, it's felt in absence. At first that might sound counterintuitive. We're taught to show up, to speak up, to assert ourselves loudly and clearly in order to be noticed, respected, and remembered. But true influence, lasting, undeniable influence, is often most clearly revealed, not when you're in the room, but when you're no longer there. It's when you withdraw that people begin to understand what your presence actually meant. It's in your absence that your impact begins to echo. Think about it. When someone is constantly available, constantly giving, constantly present, their presence starts to blend into the background. It becomes something others assume will always be there, like the furniture in a room or the hum of a fridge. Useful, familiar, but no longer deeply valued. That's not because people are bad or ungrateful. It's because familiarity breeds comfort, and comfort often dulls appreciation. People tend to underestimate what they think they'll never lose. Your presence, no matter how warm or valuable, can begin to be taken for granted simply because it's always there. Now the moment you pull back, genuinely, not manipulatively, you create space. And in that space, a mirror appears. People start to reflect on what they were experiencing without even realizing it. The jokes that made them laugh, the way they felt more confident when you were around, the emotional safety your words offered. They begin to feel the contrast between having you and not having you. And that contrast teaches them more than your words ever could. Absence reveals weight. It reveals importance. Imagine a building with one invisible pillar. Nobody notices it when everything's standing strong, but remove it, and suddenly the structure feels unstable. People are quick to identify what's missing only after it's gone. That's what happens when you step back. You stop explaining. You stop showing up with the same energy, and the silence begins to speak. Not in a petty or bitter way, but in a way that forces people to consider, was I valuing this person the way I should have? This doesn't just apply to romantic relationships. It applies to friendships, workplaces, family dynamics, everywhere people grow used to your emotional labor. If you're always the one checking in, always the one smoothing things over, always the one making others feel better, they begin to forget what it costs you. They don't necessarily mean to overlook you. It's just human nature. But when you stop showing up with the same level of emotional generosity, the room starts to feel colder, quieter, less complete. And that's when people start to notice. The irony is that many people try to assert their value by being more present, by doing more, saying more, being louder. They think that by doubling their presence, they'll double their impact. But often the opposite happens. They end up draining themselves trying to be visible, while their actual worth gets diluted in the process. The secret isn't always in doing more. It's in knowing when to do less, when to pause, when to let silence speak for you. When you're no longer available in the same way, it causes a shift. Suddenly, the people who thought they could take their time replying to you are the ones wondering why you haven't reached out. The people who assumed you'd always say yes are now faced with a version of you that respects your own boundaries. And the shift isn't about punishment, it's about clarity, it's about reminding others and yourself of what your energy is actually worth. This doesn't mean you cut people off at the first sign of disregard. It doesn't mean you withdraw with resentment or a hidden agenda. It simply means you recognize that your value isn't proven by how much you give. It's felt in the void that follows when you stop giving, you stop chasing, you stop explaining, and instead you let your absence do the explaining for you. When people begin to miss the calm you brought into chaos, the confidence you inspired, the subtle encouragements you offered without needing recognition, that's when they finally understand the role you played. And by that time, you've already elevated yourself. Because true power isn't about demanding to be seen. It's about being so valuable, so irreplaceable, that your lack of presence speaks louder than anything you could have said while you were still there. Silence is not weakness, it's a signal. In a world where we are constantly encouraged to voice our opinions, share our thoughts, and speak up for what we want, silence often gets misinterpreted. Too often we associate silence with shyness, passivity, or a lack of confidence. We're led to believe that if we're not speaking up, we're somehow falling behind. But silence is not just the absence of sound, it is a deliberate choice, a powerful tool that can communicate far more than words ever could. In fact, silence can be a signal, a message that speaks volumes to those who are paying attention. Think about how silence operates in relationships, whether personal, professional, or even casual. How often do we use silence as a way to communicate something when words fail us? A quiet glance can express more understanding than 1,000 verbal reassurances. The moment of quiet before a confrontation can carry more weight than an angry outburst. It's in the pauses, in the moments when we choose not to respond immediately, that we can convey our boundaries, our disinterest, our dissatisfaction, or even our respect. Silence holds power because it is intentional. It's a space where things are left unsaid, but deeply felt. In many situations, silence serves as a boundary. When someone is pushing your limits or behaving in a way that no longer serves you, silence becomes your defense. It's not a retreat or a sign of surrender, but a firm statement that says, I will not engage in this behavior. I will not give you more of my time or energy. Silence in this context isn't a sign of weakness, it's an assertion of self-respect. You're not scrambling to defend yourself or argue your point. Instead, you're letting the absence of engagement be a clear signal that you've already made up your mind, and that this conversation isn't worth continuing. In the face of someone who thrives on drama or conflict, silence can be the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. It removes the fuel from their fire, denying them the reaction they desperately seek. In that silence, you regain control, and the power dynamics shift. But silence doesn't only apply to moments of conflict, it's just as effective in moments of opportunity. When you've established your value and your worth, sometimes the most effective thing you can do is remain quiet, allowing others to come to you. This is particularly true in the professional world, where people are often drawn to those who don't overstate their abilities. You don't need to brag, over-explain, or constantly push your agenda forward. Instead, let your work, your presence, and your calm confidence do the talking. In these situations, silence serves as a signal of self-assurance. You trust that your value is evident, and you don't feel the need to prove it through loud words or actions. Your quiet strength becomes magnetic, drawing others in without you lifting a finger. Silence also holds a unique power when it comes to our emotions. We often assume that silence equals discomfort or avoidance, but sometimes it can signify deep reflection or internal processing. When faced with a difficult situation or an emotional moment, silence gives us the space to process what we're feeling. It's not always about having an immediate answer or response. By choosing silence, we communicate that we are considering the situation deeply and that we won't speak without intention. This careful pause can be a signal that we value clarity over reaction, thoughtfulness over impulsiveness. In a world that often demands immediate answers, choosing to stay silent in moments of emotional intensity signals maturity and emotional intelligence. At the same time, silence can be a signal to others about their own behavior. When we withdraw from a conversation or a situation, we are indirectly sending a message to the other person that their actions or words are no longer acceptable. Silence has the power to create space for others to reflect on their own behavior. It gives them time to recognize what they've done wrong, or what they might have taken for granted. In relationships, this kind of silence can be a powerful tool for self-awareness, both for yourself and for the other person. It says, "I am not here to tolerate disrespect or inconsiderate actions." It's an invitation for the other person to reconsider their approach and perhaps come to you with more understanding. But silence isn't only a tool of resistance or self-defense. It's also a sign of strength in moments of uncertainty. How many times have you heard someone speak out of fear or insecurity, trying to fill the air with words to cover up their discomfort? Silence, on the other hand, shows that you don't need to speak in order to hold your ground. You can stand in the face of uncertainty, letting the situation unfold, without rushing to fill the silence with empty words. It's an expression of patience, of waiting for the right moment, or waiting for someone else to take the lead. In this way, silence shows your inner strength, your ability to endure, and your faith in timing. It says, "I am not afraid of quiet moments. I am comfortable in my own stillness." So silence is not weakness. It's a signal of strength, self-respect, emotional intelligence, and confidence. It's a reminder that sometimes, the loudest thing we can say is nothing at all. Silence invites people to pay attention, to reflect, and to recognize that the absence of words often carries far more meaning than any sentence we could utter. Pulling away creates emotional gravity. At first glance, this might seem paradoxical. After all, we're often taught that in relationships, whether they are romantic, platonic, or professional, the more we give of ourselves, the more we engage, the stronger the bond becomes. Yet there's a hidden truth here. The very act of pulling away, of creating distance, can sometimes draw people in more deeply than anything else you could do. The more you create space, the more you make yourself emotionally unavailable, the more others begin to feel the weight of your presence. It's as if, by stepping back, you create an invisible force that pulls others closer, forcing them to confront their own feelings and needs in ways they wouldn't if you were constantly there. When you constantly make yourself available, always eager to listen, to give, to be present, people can begin to take you for granted. Your energy becomes part of the background noise, familiar and comfortable, but not always deeply valued. People stop appreciating what they have, because they never experience its absence. They don't realize how much you bring into their lives, until you're no longer around to do so. That's when they start feeling the pull of your absence. The emotional gravity starts to kick in. Emotional gravity is a force that's felt when someone's attention or affection is no longer freely available. It's like when a planet shifts in its orbit, or a magnetic field subtly changes. It isn't always immediately noticeable, but there's an undeniable effect. When you pull away, you force others to recalibrate, to feel the loss of the energy you once gave. This doesn't mean you are manipulating or playing games. It simply means you are acknowledging that your worth isn't in constantly giving, and that sometimes the best way to show people your value is by withdrawing and letting them come to you. What often happens when we pull away is that the person on the other side begins to question themselves. They feel the absence of your attention, your care, or your time, and they start to wonder why they took it for granted. They begin to feel the emotional space you once filled, and in that space, they may begin to reassess their priorities, their feelings, and the value of your connection. They might think, "Where did that person go?" Or "What happened to the dynamic we once had?" This moment of introspection is where emotional gravity is created. It's the magnetic force that pulls them back toward you, often without them even realizing it. The longer you remain emotionally distant, the stronger that gravity becomes, and the harder it is for them to ignore the absence. The act of pulling away isn't about playing hard to get, or about seeking revenge for past slights. It's about creating the right conditions for others to feel the emotional significance of your presence. Just like in the natural world, where things of great mass have a gravitational pull, when you are a person of emotional substance, your absence leaves a void. People are naturally drawn to fill that void, to seek out the emotional space you once held. They begin to see your worth not just in what you gave when you were present, but in the vacuum that forms when you're not there. That emptiness starts to communicate more than any words or actions ever could. When you pull away, you also allow the other person to take responsibility for their actions, feelings, and behaviors. You stop being the one to constantly initiate, to constantly give, and you create space for them to reach out, to engage, and to invest. People often think that relationships are about keeping the other person emotionally tethered to you at all times, but the truth is, the healthiest relationships often work in balance. When you give too much, you rob the other person of the opportunity to pursue you, to show you that they value you. When you pull away, you place the power back in their hands, and it forces them to act from a place of genuine desire, not obligation. This kind of emotional pull doesn't always happen immediately, but it's a process. The first signs of emotional gravity may be subtle. At first, the person might not even notice that you've pulled back. They may go on with their life, not realizing that the connection you shared is changing. But over time, the absence will begin to weigh on them. It will begin to create a sense of longing, a need to reconnect, a desire to understand why things feel different. This isn't manipulation. It's the natural response to the absence of something valuable. Just as a planet in space doesn't immediately sense the presence of another gravitational force, people don't always feel the void until it becomes too strong to ignore. The beauty of emotional gravity lies in its subtlety. It doesn't require overt gestures, loud declarations, or dramatic displays. Instead, it works in the quiet spaces. It's the moments where you choose not to respond immediately, where you create emotional distance without any grand announcement. It's the weight of your silence, your absence, and your careful consideration of when to engage. That's when people start to notice that something has shifted. They feel the pull, and often they will find themselves moving toward you in a way they hadn't before, seeking your presence, your attention, your energy. Pulling away creates emotional gravity because it reminds people that you're not easily available, that you value your own energy, and that your attention is not something to be taken for granted. When people begin to feel the weight of your absence, that's when they realize how much your presence actually meant. And as the gravity grows stronger, they'll find themselves drawn back to you, not out of obligation, but out of a deeper understanding of your worth, and the space you occupy in their emotional world. Don't chase, channel. This simple piece of advice holds a profound truth that many people overlook in their pursuit of success, love, and personal fulfillment. So much of our energy is spent in the chase, the relentless pursuit of someone or something, hoping that by putting ourselves out there, by running after whatever we desire, we'll eventually get what we want. But there's an entirely different way to approach life, one that doesn't involve chasing or running after things. Instead, it's about channeling your energy, focus, and intention toward what truly matters, and allowing things to come to you naturally when the time is right. When we chase, we put ourselves in a position of desperation. Chasing is fueled by the belief that something is out of reach, something we want or need, and we're running after it because we think it will complete us, validate us, or solve our problems. This mindset often comes from a place of insecurity. It's the belief that we are incomplete without that one person, that job, that validation, or that success. And so we chase. We try to get noticed, to get someone's attention, to force things to happen. But in doing so, we unknowingly signal that we don't believe in our own worth or power. Chasing makes us appear desperate, and when we appear desperate, we often end up pushing the very thing we want further away. People can sense desperation, and instead of drawing them in, it repels them. The alternative to chasing is to channel your energy. Channeling is not about forcing something to happen, but about being clear on your intentions, focused on your goals, and using your energy to move forward in a way that aligns with your values and your self-respect. It's about understanding that your worth isn't dependent on external validation, and that the things you desire will come to you when you are ready for them, when you've cultivated the right mindset and energy. Instead of running after something, you become the kind of person who attracts it. When you channel your energy, you stop looking for external validation to fill you up. You focus inward and align yourself with your purpose, your goals, and your authentic self. This shift in focus is incredibly powerful. When you stop chasing, you start living with intention. Instead of scattering your energy in all directions, you direct it toward your passions, your work, and the things that bring you joy and fulfillment. By doing so, you naturally become magnetic to the people, opportunities, and situations that align with your true desires. Rather than seeking approval from others, you become the source of your own confidence, and in turn, others will be drawn to that inner strength. Think about people who are magnetic in their presence. They don't chase validation, approval, or attention. They don't go out of their way to force connections or make people notice them. Instead, they channel their energy into living authentically and passionately. Their focus is on themselves, on their goals, on growing and improving, and this energy naturally attracts others. People are drawn to them because they exude confidence and a sense of purpose. They're not desperately searching for attention, they're simply living their truth, and that authenticity is magnetic. When you stop chasing, you also stop wasting energy on things that aren't meant for you. Chasing implies a sense of urgency and a fear of losing out. It means you're constantly moving after something, but you may not be moving in the right direction. Channeling your energy, on the other hand, is about being intentional with where you put your focus. You stop running in circles and start moving toward your goals with clarity and purpose. You let go of the idea that you need to scramble to make things happen. Instead, you trust that when you put your energy in the right places, everything else will fall into place. This is a mindset shift that can completely transform your experience of life. One of the most powerful aspects of channeling your energy is that it frees you from the need for constant validation from others. When you chase, you are often looking outside of yourself for affirmation. You're hoping someone will see your value, recognize your efforts, or give you what you're seeking. But when you channel your energy, you begin to realize that you are enough as you are. You don't need anyone's approval to feel good about yourself, or to pursue your dreams. You focus on what you can control, your actions, your thoughts, your mindset, and trust that the right people, the right opportunities, and the right circumstances will come to you when you are aligned with your true self. This principle also applies to the way you approach relationships. So often we chase after love, approval, or validation from others. We pursue relationships with the hope that they will fulfill something missing inside of us. But when we channel our energy toward becoming the best version of ourselves, we stop seeking approval from others. We stop relying on someone else to make us feel complete. Instead, we attract people who are aligned with who we truly are, people who appreciate us for the value we bring into their lives. This doesn't mean that you stop making an effort in relationships. It means that you stop being dependent on external validation to feel worthy. You become the kind of person who naturally draws others in because you have learned to value yourself first. Don't chase, channel. It's a simple yet transformative shift. When you focus on channeling your energy toward growth, authenticity, and clarity, you stop feeling like you have to run after everything that seems desirable. Instead, you begin to attract the right things, the right people, and the right circumstances. You stop running in circles, and instead you move forward with purpose, trust, and patience. You realize that your energy is your greatest asset, and when you use it wisely, the world around you will begin to respond. The more you channel your energy into what truly matters, the more you'll realize that everything you desire will come to you, naturally, effortlessly, and at the right time. Begging doesn't come from manipulation, it comes from realization. At first glance, this might seem like a harsh or even contradictory statement. Begging is typically seen as a desperate attempt to get something from someone, often driven by a sense of powerlessness or neediness. In the traditional sense, begging is linked with desperation and the desire to manipulate others into giving us what we want. But there's another side to this notion, a side that speaks to how we often beg, not outwardly, but inwardly, because we have come to a painful realization about something important, the realization of our own vulnerabilities, our limits, and ultimately, our need for change. When we beg for something, whether it's affection, recognition, forgiveness, or something else, it often stems from the deep feeling of not having enough, whether it's love, attention, or validation. In these moments we might feel that the only way to get what we need is to plead or cry out, hoping that the other person will recognize our desperation and give us what we're seeking. This kind of begging often stems from a place of manipulation, where we consciously or unconsciously try to elicit a response from the other person, hoping that they will see how much we need them, how lost we feel without them. In this case, begging becomes a way to control the other person's actions, to force them to act according to our desires. However, when we speak about begging coming from realization, we are talking about a different kind of awareness. This realization isn't about using someone to fulfill our needs. It's about understanding our own vulnerability, our limitations, and the consequences of our actions or inactions. This realization happens when we finally understand that we can't always control outcomes, and we certainly can't force people to give us what we want. It's the moment when we recognize that our desires or needs may not be met in the way we imagined, and we have to come to terms with the fact that we may be powerless in some situations. In this sense, begging becomes less about manipulation and more about an honest confrontation with our own emotional state and understanding our limitations. This realization often comes after periods of self-deception or overexertion. We may spend months or even years trying to convince ourselves that we don't need others, that we can do everything on our own, or that the world owes us something because of the effort we've put in. But as time passes, we begin to see the cracks in that facade. We realize that we can't do it all alone, that our relationships need nurturing, and that we've been denying our own emotional needs in the process. It's when we come to this realization that begging, in its true form, occurs. It's not about trying to manipulate or guilt someone into giving us what we want. It's about recognizing our own emotional pain and the awareness that we need something that we cannot provide for ourselves.